Hello and welcome back to Great American Underdog, the podcast where we share stories of strength and success from real life underdogs. Today's special guest is someone who I've learned a lot from over the past few years, both personally and professionally. He is someone who has gone from homelessness to a thriving 20 plus year career in the automotive industry, which has now led him to becoming the chief operations officer at Bozard Ford Lincoln in St. Augustine, Florida. He's also the author of Mile One, which is an endless journey to effective leadership, which has turned into an opportunity for him to coach leadership in Ford dealerships across the country. It is my absolute honor today to welcome Ed Roberts. Ed, how are you, sir?
Excellent. Thanks for having me on, Ron. I'm looking forward to this. This should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you being here, of course. So, just to get started, give me a little bit of background on where you're from. I know that you live in Florida now. Were you always in Florida? And what was life like early on?
So I live in St. Augustine, Florida. I was born and raised just north of here in Jacksonville, Florida, and I have lived most of my life down here. I've lived in Michigan, lived in both of the Carolinas, lived in Atlanta, and outside of those four places, I've lived here all my life. The and you opened with talking about an element of homelessness, and that was a element of my life early on. I grew up in the ghetto, so to speak, of Jacksonville, and times was tough. I was in a family, born into a family. You can't choose who your family are. I was born into a family that had been layered of different um, generations of not necessarily being contributors to society, and it carries on. And my brothers and sister, the one that's still left, and most of my family still live that lifestyle because it is a choice. It's a personal choice to do something different. And I was fortunate early on to say, I think there's something else out there, and I became a self-inflicted homeless, meaning I left what I grew up in to go find something else, and that's a leap of faith in itself. But I would say it's turned out quite well.
Yeah, like you said earlier, you don't get to pick your family, but you do have that personal choice to be able to go out and say, you know what, even though I know I'm going to be homeless by leaving, self-inflicted, right? I will still have a better opportunity to find out what's out there than if I were to just stay in this situation. Because if I stay in this situation, I get more of the same thing.
More sameness does not help us, that's for sure. And in that lifestyle, it isn't that that's just the lifestyle that you and your family live in. It's where you're at. When I say the ghetto, that's what we all have, those neighborhoods that we're afraid to go into, and that's what those places are. So the people across the street live the same lifestyle that we did. People next door live that same lifestyle. So in order to change that lifestyle, you got to separate yourself from that lifestyle, and that's why the self infliction of let's go out and see if there's something else out there. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, in your case, it works. And from a lot of the learning that I do, because every day, and just like you, I know you're just lifelong learning and lessons that, we could find in the everyday things that happen all around us. Being in the right environment in terms of putting yourself somewhere where you future pace yourself, you're literally telling your mind, like, this is where I want to be, and these are the people I want to be around. So if you don't get yourself out of those situations, on your own and put yourself in an environment where, wow, this feels good. Like you can tell the difference when, there's momentum happening in your life because you changed your environment. So would you say that changing your environment had the biggest impact on you early on, moving towards finding some level of success?
There is no doubt that changing my environment helped with that because I mean, ultimately, you are a product of your environment. We've all heard the statement or the phrase that says, "If you want to see what your tomorrow looks like, let me see your friends today." Well, it wasn't just my friends; it was my entire surroundings, and that would have been my tomorrow. And I think I was the fourth of five kids in my family, and I think if I was one of those first two or three, I probably would have lived that lifestyle. But being the fourth kid and having the vision to look out and say, I can't do or I don't want to do what they do. And I learn from their mistakes and says, I got to prevent from doing that myself. And that was the early elements of the motivation to do something different.
Yeah, it's funny because Brian Tracy, who you may know, he often talks about screen of beliefs. And when we run all of our thoughts, ideas, actions through that screen of beliefs in our brain before we decide if they're positive or negative. So, being the fact that you were able to watch your older siblings and your parents, make the mistakes allows you to change that screen of beliefs in your own brain. Do you think that watching those mistakes were those the key lessons from that time that stuck with you moving forward, that told you it's time to make a change?
There is no doubt. And I think most all of us, the audience as well, have watched some episodes of Cops. And we've all watched some kind of reality television. And those the Cops is a very much a reality television where they come in and they break the door down and they berate the house with 30 cops and they do what those are things that happen. And we see the things, we see the negative on the news now where they stepped on this guy's throat and he couldn't breathe and this happened and whatever else. We see those things. But the reality of it is that's what they have to do to protect themselves. They're walking into or running into a hostile environment. They have to do those things. Well, that happened over and over and over again in my house and the house across where they was coming in to get my dad or they was coming to get my brother, or they was coming to get my sister or somebody in the family. And when they braid the house, when they barge through that door, knocking it off the hinges, whatever it takes for them to come in, everyone is guilty until they figure out who you are.
Hmm.
So I've had my head stepped on, my throat stepped on more times than I care to count because they don't know who you are and they're there to protect themselves as well. And over time, watching them do that, being a piece of that, and then watch them take away someone in the family highlights that there's a reason why they took them and left the rest of us here. That was the very early elements of saying, hey, there is a different world out there.
Yeah, so, that allowed you, I guess that's what allowed you to build up the courage to say, "I can't stay here anymore," because a lot of people can, like you just said, can end up falling into it even more and not, decide to, "Hey, I need to make a change." My father, grew up with just his mom, and had to hit his stepfather with a baseball bat at 13 years old, because he was hitting my grandmother, and step up at a young age to make a difference in your life, although it was an act of violence and I don't condone that. In his life, that was his option because he wasn't going to stick around to watch that happen anymore. So for you it was like, I know that I didn't get picked when the cops came to my house because I know that I'm not making these mistakes, and it's also not who I am. So I'm going to go find out who I am and also what else is out there. Is that accurate?
And yeah, that is very accurate. And also, who can I become? And that's a journey in itself because we should always be developing. And that's I can't say that I knew that setting out, but it's certainly I had to have a belief that I could be different, and that was the early elements of that.
Yeah, my difference for me was, my dad was a hardworking man, and so was my mom, a hardworking woman, and just watching them at times struggle to just pay bills, keep a roof over our head, and what stress that did to my family. I just knew I was like, I'm not gonna have that happen because I saw what it did. I was like, I'm not gonna have that happen when I get older and I have a family because I never want them to feel that feeling of what if we can't pay the bills, and what that would be like for them. So, you're always becoming something, but like you said, at that early age, I didn't realize that's like, okay, that's who I want to become. It was more of it's a more of a feeling at a young age than it is a realization, of working towards something. And we're still becoming who we are and writing our story every day. So that's the beauty of it. Thank God we're still here to do that. So your story at this point now, you leave, and then when do you decide to go into automotive? Was it like right away that you said, you know what, I think I'm going to go apply for a job in the automotive industry, or did you have a couple on off jobs before that? What happened?
When I first stepped out, I was digging in dumpsters, getting aluminum cans, cardboard, glass bottles, anything that I could turn into some value.
Mhm.
And I take elements of that story and talk about it in some of the leadership stuff that I do, because there's different levels of homeless people. The guy that stands out there on a sign and says, "Give me your money," he's entitled and says, "You owe me, give me some of your money," versus the guy that's going to go out and try to take what may be nothing to most of us and turn it into some type of value to support himself. And there's just different levels of that. So I started off doing that. And what the audience don't know, for the most part, because they don't talk about it a whole lot, I was actually a repo man before I became a tech apprentice.
Hmm.
And but I was doing that, and getting a lawnmower out of the trash, fixing that, using that to cut grass and whatever else. And I started cutting grass at a buy here, pay here lot. And that guy didn't want to get shot. Um, so in that time frame, I started doing his repo stuff at night. I got $50 a car. I wasn't getting that cutting
That's a
grass. So
that's a
yeah,
deal. Yeah.
yeah, I'm good. And in that time frame, we didn't have computer keys or whatever else. So when he'd sell a car, he would just have an extra key. So it's a matter of going up in someone's driveway and finding the car, going up in someone's driveway and driving off in a car,
Yeah.
and hope that you don't get shot doing it.
Dangerous job.
Yes. But if the car wouldn't start or whatever else, there was obviously issues there. But if you watched them pull up, then you knew the car ran, and there's opportunity to do it. So in doing that, I'm still going to high school, and I'm skipping a lot of school because I'm working as much as I possibly can to make things work. But I'm going enough to still get education. And then comes around for ninth grade, and now you got to make a decision. Do you go to VOTEC school along with high school? And quite honestly, this is where the audience knows some of the elements if they've listened to me before. I picked automotive because it was high on the list. It was alphabetical order, and other than auto body, there's automotive.
Right.
And so I was going to a tech school for automotive. And in that, I met a gentleman that was there for a job fair, and told him I need a job. And he says, "Well, come by and see me, and we'll talk about that." So I did, and I went by to see him, and he hired me, and I went that weekend. That was 4th of July weekend in 1992. And I went that weekend and worked as hard as I could, doing all the things that I knew how to do, and that was cut grass and pick up aluminum cans and cardboard and all that stuff. And I made $400.
Hmm.
And I went and picked up some tools at Sears, $400 worth of tools in that time frame. That was a decent number of tools. May not have
Yeah.
been the highest quality of tools, but it was a decent number of
It
tools.
you got done what you needed to, and you were showing that, like, I'm willing to put forward the effort to be here by making an investment in that to the guy that hired you.
Yes. So then I show up there, and he had told me the week before that I'm not going to be here Monday. Come in and see my assistant, and he'll get you rolling. We'll start you off over here with Terry, and da 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 da. And he gave me the whole rundown. So I go, and I'm proud, and I'm going to get a job, and I tell my family that this is happening, because I didn't stop communicating with them just because I left home. To I can't communicate. That
Right.
wasn't where I wasn't spending all my time there. I wasn't getting pulled down into that. And they all told me, "You're not one of them. You're not someone that's going to be able to make it out in the real world. You're not one of those people. You
Wow.
take that stuff back, get your money back." And
Wow.
I said, "No, that's not going to happen,
Did that
because
light a fire in you even more because of the non-belief?
not yet." It
Okay.
did tie into, but at that moment in time, it didn't.
Fair.
That's the life they choose. I'm going to choose this one. They don't know whether I can make it or not, was what I was thinking.
Got it.
Well, then I show up there on Monday, and I go in and I ask for the guy that his assistant, and I won't mention the name. And he judged a book by its cover. He come out, he met me. Yes, Conrad had told him about me, but it didn't necessarily paint the picture for him.
Mhm.
Well, think about that. Think about who I am. I grew up in the ghetto. I'm living in my car. I'm all these things, and so I look like a hoodlum. I smelled like a hoodlum. I sound like a hoodlum. And he
Sure.
made a judgment call based on the information he had in front of him. And we all have to do that. So I don't hold anything against him. I'm friends with that guy today. And he says, "We don't have a spot for you here." I said, "You don't understand. Conrad's already hired me. He said, this is who I'm going to work with. He's going to put me on tiers." He said, "Boy, I don't have a place for you here."
Mhm.
I said, "Okay." And I left. And I'm sitting out in front of the place at the traffic light, waiting to turn left, and it's playing back through my head that my family told me I can't make it. I do just need, they was right. I just need to take this stuff back
Oh,
and get my money back. And then it just hit me for whatever reason. I don't know. Call it fate, call it whatever. And something just said, he was willing to give you a chance. See if someone else will do the same.
right.
And before that light turned green for me to turn left, I said, I'm going to turn right and see where it takes me.
Wow.
And I turned right, went down. That road ended about a mile down the road. I turned right again. And about 4.5 miles up, there's another Ford sign. And I said, well, that last Ford store was going to give me a chance. Let's see if this one will. And turned in there and met one of my lifelong mentors and gave him the little story and told him that I just need a chance. Just give me a chance and I'll prove that I deserved it. And he hired me for half the money they was going to hire me at the other place or whatever, but it didn't matter. He gave me that chance.
Hmm.
And then that was my sense of self-worth. And that was my sense of persistence, where you don't give up at the first no. It just means not yet. And I
Right.
have lived that all my life. I don't hear no, I hear not yet.
Hmm.
I may not be able to do that yet.
Not yet, or as some people say, I know, and I'm sure you've heard, is next opportunity, right? So at the same time, with the never give up mentality, I believe, first of all, in faith, destiny, those kind of things, that there was that power in you, something inside of you that said, this is not the end of the road for me. And it's we're going to get into your book, Mile One, but I would say that this was a speed bump. Like we talked about, being on the road. This was 100% a speed bump. And you went back to your own why inside your brain and saying, like, why am I doing this? And then saying, somebody was willing to give me a chance. I need to continue my search. It's not over for me yet. So you just followed your heart and your gut to just keep going forward. And although half the pay, like you said, doesn't matter, I'll take half the pay if you give me the opportunity to prove myself, learn the skills that I need to learn to be successful. And you persevered. So those, I think that like you said, never give up and perseverance were the specific lessons from, it sounds like, that time period more than anything, right?
Absolutely. It would have been easier to go
Hmm.
take that step back, go back and tell the family, you're right. What can I do to help? And help them live the lifestyle that they, but it was a decision to say, hey, let's go see, let's go out there and dance and see if there is a different world, because this isn't the guy that offered me a job. He's the assistant of, and let me go get someone to tell me no that makes a decision.
For someone out there that is feeling like they should retreat back to what they know, and they hit that spot of being uncomfortable, what would be a question that you think that they should ask themselves before they retreat and, let's just say, go back? What should they be saying to themselves in terms of, what's my ability to move forward? If they are second guessing it and they don't know if they should take that leap of faith, or make that next right turn and go right instead of left.
Everything boils back to mindset, and no matter what we're doing, if I mean, you and I both do a little running, and that is a very much a mental game. There is things that come into play that makes us think, why are we doing this? But it's a mental game, and that's what mindset is. Mindset is what you feed it, it believes. So if you tell it you can't do something, it continues to believe that you can't do that, and it will bring it to reality.
Mm.
And so I chose not to take no for an answer and go chase something else. And how many no's I could have took beforehand, I don't know. Ultimately, what I didn't need to. It was,
Yeah.
and I went out and chased it. But what I tell people all the time is go into something. You should never expect something, so don't have an expectation. Now, I'm not saying don't have a desired goal, but don't have an expectation, because those things are what let us down. Never expect, never assume, and never compare. We all compare ourselves. Well, I'm not that person, whatever. Well, comparing creates insecurities,
Mm.
and so we shouldn't. And then when we assume, we're assuming that we know all of the information, and we would know we don't have all the information. Ask questions. You can only learn by asking questions and listening. And then having an expectation. We see it all the time. People get upset. Well, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm this. I'm that. Well, does it really matter if it takes you 45 minutes to get there when you expected to get there in 30? What
Yeah.
difference does it make in the grand scheme of things? But that sounds simple. We create so many expectations, and then as soon as we don't reach an element of that expectation, we feel like it was a failure. Well, it wasn't a failure. It just wasn't what we expected. So have a desired outcome in this very defining line, but remove the expectations.
I love that. And also, I would attribute gratitude. If you can practice gratitude, like that person sitting in traffic, yeah, great. You're sitting in traffic in the United States of America in your car with temperature control, a comfortable seat, like you have probably some form of entertainment, especially in today's cars. So, like, what is there really to be upset about? You're alive, you're breathing. Like, when you're able to put yourself, like you said, in the mindset of gratitude and just being present, I also say does help a lot. When you don't project out into the future of the what ifs, that changes the whole ball game and changes how you approach every moment of every day, at least for me. And then on the assumptive side, like I'll use boxing as an example. On the boxing side, you could look at somebody and you would never think in a million years they're either going to be able to outfight you, or you think the opposite by looking at them. Let's say they're muscular and toned and in good shape, like I'm going to get my ass kicked right now. And in reality, fighting is fighting, not what you look like, right? And the skills that you have. And you just never know what somebody else knows, in whether it's the fight world, learning from other people. You just can't assume anything of anyone, and that's something that I've carried with me through my life, and has been a valuable lesson for me as well. Is just don't assume and don't create expectations of the future. Just be here now, like So I love that.
Exactly.
Would
Live in
you?
the moment. We get to.
Yeah, we do get to. It's 100% right. And then
Yes.
just asking questions, the curiosity piece. If you're curious enough and you show the effort, you're going to get the answers you're looking for one way or another. Would you say that you mentioned the mentorship piece? And I think that is so important and has been in my life. I would even say to some extent that in our interactions, you've inspired me, and I look at you as a bit of a professional mentor, just from reading your book Mile One and just being in the same spaces as you and listening to you talk. So thank you. You have had a significant influence on me, whether you realize it or not. But the mentors piece, some people don't realize they're mentors at times, and then sometimes you don't realize you have a specific mentor at the time of having it. So that first mentor early on that you said uh, you're still in contact with today, what piece of advice did you get from them early on that kind of molded you and helped you continue your growth?
Thank you for saying that, Ron, about being a mentor of yours, and I appreciate that. And that's the desired goal for setting out to make a difference, is to give someone an example or something to chase after or inspire hope within them. And I appreciate you saying that. That person is Charlie, and Charlie is the guy I dedicated the book to. And I will tell you, early on, he probably didn't know how much of an impact he had made on my life. And the three of the largest theft rings ever broken up in Jacksonville, my family was involved in it, and that's the life that I came from. And for him to give me that moment and say, "Hey, I and just for the audience there, that was my family. I wasn't involved in that. I was thankful enough to recognize that that wasn't a lifestyle I needed to chase, but my family still lives that, unfortunately, or some elements of my family still lives that. But for Charlie, in the moment, it was probably more competitive. In the dealership world, in
Right.
sales world, and retail world, we become very competitive. And he's probably thinking, well, if they weren't going to give him a chance, I need somebody. I'll give the guy a chance. And if it pays off, great. If it doesn't, what have we lost?
Mm-hmm.
It was probably more of a competitive move than anything at the time, but it was instrumental for me. And those are the things that we don't necessarily get going through life, is those moments that we may have made an instrumental impact on someone that you'll never know, or you won't know for years to come. And I think it was probably a decade or so before I told him how much of an impact that was on my life. I can tell you when it was, because I lost my father 10 years after that. And I tell people all the time that the the world is a better place without him here, and that's not the greatest way to refer to your family, but it's reality.
Mm,
And with that being said, with the world being a better place without him, is simply because they wasn't contributing and they didn't lead you down a path that you wish you would have taken with them. But
mm,
the reality of that is they are still your parent. And
yeah,
even though I don't have a ton of respect for my dad, he was still my dad, and there was still that connection there of being my blood father. So it even though those elements was there, it it hit home hard when he passed away.
of course.
And Charlie came. That was 10 years after he gave me that opportunity. Came to my dad's funeral and realized, because it was in the ghetto, it was where I grew up. It was 3 blocks from where I grew up, and it's my family that was there. And he realized what he had walked himself into, and
Mm,
I think he had that aha moment before I did, of how much of an impact he had made on my life at that point, and gave me that chance to come out of there. But now, fast forward that another 20 years, and man, the countless stories that you can get, just like the one that you just gave me of the impact that you may have given someone else. And one of the things that I think I've had a strength of doing is being able to identify someone's strengths and helping them build the right role around it, or helping them maximize those strengths, or helping them strengthen those things, or helping them polish some things that may not have been a strength to them, that helps them excel in what they do. And in the moment, you're not necessarily thinking how much you're changing the trajectory of their life, but as they relax and they find themselves with self-worth doing those same elements from things that you may have helped them do or helped them overcome, you've changed their life forever. You not only change their life, you change the life of everyone around them. And when you're out and about somewhere and someone comes up and mentions things like that to you, there is no better feeling. And so when I wrote that dedication to Charlie,
yeah.
and my book finally came into publication, I didn't tell him about it, and I hand delivered him a book and made him read that right in front of me, because it describes the impact that he had on my life. And and he knew elements of it at that point, but he didn't know all of them. And
Yeah, he got to see it when he read the book, really, and what must have been awesome about that moment is you got to watch his reaction, to him being able to read that, and that must have been an incredible moment for the 2 of you, and you're 100% right, like, and it's a little self-serving in a way, but the impact that you make on somebody else where you see that transition in their brain where their confidence skyrockets, I'm addicted to that also, like, on the boxing coaching side, watching somebody go from not being able to hold their hands the right way or their footwork to being able to throw punches in combination and just lit up, for me, that lights me up is when that happens. And also, you don't know, like you said, you don't know who you're having an impact on. Ever since I started my running journey yet, and I posted on Instagram and social media, I'm looking to run 1,000 miles this year. So I always post and I say how many miles out of 1,000 I am. Right now we're at like 814.7, so we're on pace. But I would go out throughout this year multiple times and be out with a friend, and a friend of theirs was with us and would go, dude, I just want to let you know, I started running because I've been watching you. So thank you, because I never saw myself as a runner. And then I said, you know what? He's doing it every day. I can go out there and do it one time. And then they ask me for tips and things like that. And the biggest question I always get is like, how do I run farther? I said, just start running. So similar to mile one is just your next mile one. I don't care if you run a mile in 30 minutes or 7 minutes, just run the mile, you know?
exactly.
But you just don't know. And the mentor piece becomes huge, and you become mentors without realizing. And mentors of yours, you get the opportunity to show them how much of an impact they had on you. So that's awesome that you got to do that with Charlie.
Well, it's the resilience for you as well, and I'm going to tell the audience. I'm going to tell on you a little bit here. Ron told me earlier this year, he said, I'm going to run 1,000 miles this year. And at that time, I think he was 40 or 50 miles ahead of schedule, but it was very early in the year. And then we checked in just after mid-year, and he was behind schedule.
Yeah. Yes, I
And it
was.
would have been easy to give up and say, okay, well, that was a good goal, but I didn't get there. But it's you didn't give up, and it's the resilience of not giving up. And now you're back ahead of schedule, and you're going to get there. There's no doubt in my mind that you're going to make that 1,000 mile, and that's a huge, huge accomplishment. But when you hit those roadblocks and you fall behind, it almost looks like too big of a mountain to climb. I won't never
Mhm.
get back there. I'm not. I'll have to try it again next year. So I got to give you a lot of credit for
Thank
making
you.
up that deficit and pushing forward through it.
Thank you, but also and I really appreciate that, Ed. It's been a journey, but, it does go in terms of our own lives and also the people that we're looking to help and serve on a daily basis of just giving them, things to little things every day to measure and improve and really, like your book says, take that next mile one. So, it's a great transition for me to get right into mile one, with you. I'm very curious, what made you decide to write a book on leadership? You've had an incredible career where you went from being an apprentice tech to now the COO of Bozard Ford Lincoln. What was the driver for you to decide to write a book, Mile One specifically on leadership?
Well, I can't say that I set out to write that book. When I moved from being an apprentice tech to a technician very early in my career, I still felt like I had to prove myself every single day.
Mm.
And the only way that I could prove myself every single day was be better than I was the day before, become the go to, become this. So I would look around and I would find who I thought was the best person out there, the best mentor in that shop, or the best technician in that shop, and I needed to at least match them. I didn't try to be better than them. I needed to match them. And then when I got to the point to where I had the respect that they had, and what it was about, all right, I'm not done. I haven't learned everything I can learn. I can still get better, and I continued on that journey. And then that ultimately evolved into maybe becoming the shop foreman there, and then becoming taking over and becoming the service manager. And in those things, it's about getting better every day. None of us are perfect. None of us knows everything. We have to be willing to learn. We have to be humble. We have to say, I don't know yet, and continue to learn. And when we do that over time, it makes those impacts that we was just talking about, whether it's elements of mentorship or pointing out something that someone never expected themselves, or making someone better than they ever thought they could be. And then over time, you hear from people over and over and over again. It says, Ed, you made an impact on my life. You should
Yeah.
write a book because people need to hear this. Well, I heard that for years, and I was flattered to hear that, because I said, I'll never write a book, but I appreciate you saying that, because it feels good. It feels good in the
Of
moment.
course. Of
But it
course.
feels good more so because you made an impact on them.
Right.
Well, after hearing that for about 10 years, I started making notes. I said, well, if I was to write a book or have someone write one for me, these are things that I would put in there. These are things that was roadblocks for me that I had to learn how to overcome, and break things down to where it's I can make it to where I can see myself accomplishing it. And so then over time of that, about 10 years of note taking, I was talking, you change your audience, you change who you hang out with, you change your social aspects over time. And by this point, I'm hanging out with other people that writes books and does different things, and very successful in business and whatever. And I'm listening to a guy's story. His name's Clint Pulver, about how he shifted from where he came from and his struggles early in life to now being a renowned speaker and author and what. And I'm having a conversation with him, and or I thought, you could do this, Ed. And when we left that conversation, it just kept bouncing back and forth in my head. And finally, I picked up the phone about 2 weeks later and called him and says, "You've inspired me to write a book." And I took those elements and started putting them together, and life lessons along the way, and created Mal One. And up to probably about 8 years before the book of Mal One, I didn't necessarily have a name or any kind of thing that I could tie to the philosophy.
Right.
That kind of evolved over the last 8 years. And I tossed around all kinds of titles for the book and whatever else. And I had to keep circling back to the grassroots of what allowed me to get from where I was at to where I currently sat in that role then. and it had to be Mal one, however
Yeah,
I wanted to tie it in or whatever else. And so then I put the book together, and there's going to be a revision. There's things that as soon as you push the button to print it, there's things that hit you and think, man, we
of
could have put this,
course. I
put
should have
that
done
in.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the piece of always trying to get better. So there'll be a revision to it, and I've added a couple things to where I could write a few more chapters, um, because in the absence of process, it's all reaction,
Of
and
course.
there's so that could be a chapter in itself, and there's others as well. Um, but once I once I start to do something, it's rare that I give up on it. And
Mhm.
so when I made that phone call and told him I was going to write a book, there was no question about if I was going to at that point. It was a question of how long it was going to take me.
Mhm.
And I'm an early riser, and so I'm a lot of times awake by 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And those are the perfect times to write. You're not getting emails, you're not getting text messages, you're not getting phone calls. And so I could get up with a fresh mind and just think, okay, and I'd put it down. Now, is it easy? It's not, because there you'll do it. You'll do a first draft. It'll make sense to you, and then when you have someone else read it, and they don't have all the elements inside of them that you have,
No.
so they're not painting that psychological picture, and then you got to rewrite it to where it makes sense, and over time it gets to the point to where what did I do to myself? You just get to the point where you just want to push the delete button and say that was a
Uh-huh.
mistake.
I feel that a lot, Ed, with the podcast piece because I've never before Great American Underdog, I never shot a podcast and I've never video edited. I'm not like a video editing uh, expert over here. And I'm worried about sending it out to another editor and delegating it because they don't know my philosophy and what I like and don't like. So I totally get that. But I
Exactly.
gotta let go eventually.
Yes. But you continue to push through those obstacles, you learn from them, and you ask yourself, will it make an impact on others? And
Right.
there is people out there, and that's why I tie that homeless element to part of my leadership stuff that I do, is because there's people out there that may have been a victim of circumstances. Most of the time, it's not necessarily a victim of circumstances, it's a victim of poor decisions that got them there, but sometimes it's circumstances, but they need to know that there is hope. They don't need to feel like they fell into this trap and now they're stuck there. They need to know that there's opportunity to come out, and the opportunity to come out is with the right attitude and all the effort in the world. And when you, if I can paint that picture, at that point it became, if this book will help one person, that's enough for me. If
Right.
it Because now I can truly sit here and say I get to do all these things as we just talked about, rather than I have to or I got to or whatever it may be. And so over time and as it came together, it became a proud piece that hey, I've actually written a book. But Ron, even to this day, and it's been 15 months since I published it, I still struggle with telling myself you're an author, Ed.
Hmm.
But it's I am, and it's something you can't take away. And now that I am, I've always been. I got to get better. I got to get better at everything I do. And with that, I want to revise the book. I want to make it better, and I want to write a second and a third one that gives a little bit more of my story.
Yeah, I think so because I've obviously read the book and it's a lot of on the leadership piece and really change management as a leader. But there's some quotes that I pulled from it that I absolutely love and you just touched on, which is shift your mind from I cannot because to I can because and cutting the T from the index card. So literally, audience listening at home, write down something that you believe you can't do on an index card. Right, I can't because and the reason and then put the T in the top right corner and cut it right out. And then now reread it to yourself as I can because, and it's just like you said, that mindset shift and that progress. Another quote: "Progress happens when we shift our minds from the situation being an obstacle to an opportunity." You saw as like, I'm not going to write a book. I don't know how to write a book. What do you mean? Like, I don't know the first thing about writing a book. And I was like, you know what? I can write a book, and the opportunity becomes how many people I can impact with it. I absolutely love that. And the last one that I'll pull from it, because I have a bunch, but one of my other favorites is inspiration transcends temporary bursts of motivation, and it taps deeper into the aspirations, values, and purposes that reside within individuals, stirring their hearts and minds to envision and strive for something greater. And the reason I just said that is because of what you just said. You can have somebody that can walk off the street like you did and look for an opportunity, and you could look at them just like you look at a resume, and you make judgments based on who they are, what they're going to be like, how they're going to work, all these different things. And you could be so far off if you are the person that does take them to their next level, because all they really needed was somebody to either believe in them or show them that they care. A lot of times it's just that they don't have the confidence in themselves at first. And I've seen that in the boxing world. I've been that person because I didn't grow up boxing. I got bullied, and I told you the story that led to me boxing. So I never pinned myself as that, but somebody, my coach, my father, they inspired me to say, "Hey, you can do this." And then once you hit that point of inspiration and you know you can, and then you do it, like you wrote your book, now all of a sudden it's like, wow, I got to take a step back and say, I am an author, and give yourself that credit. So I'm asking you to please give yourself that credit because you've done a lot already. And there is, yes, definitely more to come. So I am curious too, with that being said, Ed, like, what would you say is your next mile one? Like, if you had to pick something right now, what would you say that next mile one for you is?
Let me circle back to an element of what you just talked about there. Then we'll go to the mile one.
Sure.
The reason I wrote the chapter about inspiration versus motivation and put those elements in there is because inspiration is longer standing. You'll always reflect back on inspiration. Motivation has a shelf life. It's only going to last so long. And once it's gone, it's gone. You don't reflect back on what motivated you to do that. Inspiration you'll reflect back on. And confidence is paramount. Like you said, there's things that led to it that built your confidence. And if we that shifts back to the mindset piece. If you believe you can do something, you can go do it. If you tell yourself you can't, you are exactly right. You can't and you won't. You have to convince yourself. And it's not hard to convince yourself. You just got to tell yourself, I can do this. I
Uh-huh.
just can't do it yet. Shifting to mile one, my next mile one, personally, as we talked about earlier, running a bit, my next challenge is I'm going to run a marathon, and I'm going to do it in the first quarter next year. And the I don't have, I'm not going to set a time that I'm looking for or whatever, because I'm setting an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
My desired results is to finish, and
Yeah.
and so whatever that time frame is, it's going to be my personal best because it's going to be the only one I've ever ran. So no matter what, I will set a record when I run my marathon.
I
For
love that,
sure.
man. And that is a mile one that, like, for me, what I know running is for me. And if anybody listening out in the audience, if you want to find something that, can help you persevere through challenges, I would 100% recommend running to people, to be honest with you, and just start. Um, because what you're doing by setting yourself up for that marathon is just so much, like, between the commitment, the measuring, the consistency element, the strength training. There's so much that goes into it. And then you also have to tell yourself, like, I got both my legs, like, and I can run straight up and run through 26 miles, however long it takes me. New York City Marathon just passed, and I watched some guy bear crawl the whole 26 miles. He did it in 20 hours,
Wow.
and goes back to even like the 1950s, Roger Barrister. Nobody believed that you can break a 5-minute mile. And then he did it. And then a week later, like so many other people did it.
So you're right. Then he broke the 4 minute mile.
Yeah, yeah. Then it broke four. It was a 4-minute mile. Yep, not 5 minutes,
Kept
but nobody
going.
believed it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, because one person did it, everybody could do it. So you are inspiring people every day, whether you realize it or not, as well. And I love that next mile one for you. I also keep me posted on the details on that, because I might want to join you because I haven't ran a marathon yet. So that's on my bucket list too. Um, Talk to me a little bit about, with mile one still in mind, for the listeners, how would they find inspiration maybe to set up their next mile one? And then how do they measure the progress of it, especially when, as results are not immediately visible?
A marathon is 26.2 miles. And yes, It is tough for anybody to get off the couch and say, I'm going to go run a marathon and actually go run that marathon. It starts at mile one, running that first mile and getting better at that first mile, and then adding a mile to it and getting better at both of those, and then adding another. And before you know it, yes, it is a stretch. And yes, you're pushing yourself. But before you know it, when you run that first mile, when you start a run, that was easy.
Hmm.
The next one is easy. And by the time you get to the third and fourth, you're just getting warmed up. Well, not long before that, you was struggling to even get that first mile. So it's about getting started. And that's what mile one is, exactly that. It's about getting off your butt and getting started. And sometimes getting started is the smallest step, but it's a step closer to the desired results. And yes, everything we do, we don't see instant results. We can go to the gym for a week and look in the mirror and we'll still look the same. We can go on a diet and try to lose weight. And if we don't set a goal, if we don't set a desired outcome, that's not expectation, but a desired outcome, then where do you stop? Well, I set out to lose weight. I lost pound. I'm good. Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit from that if that was the desired deal. So, but it's about losing that first pound to keep
Mm.
going to lose that second one. So it's all about getting started. And that's our toughest thing. There's so many times that we feel like we can't do something. Well, one, telling your mind you can't do it is correct. You got to quit telling your mind that and say, let me go try it. So if you change that I can't with try, then before you know it, you can erase the try and say, I'm going to go do this. And what you got to start with the first element of it. So whatever that goal is, you break it down into believable steps. And in business, I talk about we're a private cap store, but we're still going to do $500 million in revenue this year. And that's a small number in a corporation type deal.
Right.
But 10 years ago, if we'd have talked about we're going to do $500 million in a year annually, we'd have never thought that was possible. Well, today it's possible. Tomorrow it's possible. Next week it's possible. Next year it's possible. Next year we'll exceed it. But with that, you have to get started. You have to sell that first one,
Hmm.
and then the second one, $1 million, and the third $1 million of revenue. And it's just about getting started and breaking it down to where it's achievable. So let's take that a little bit deeper. You tell someone we're going to do $500,000 or $500 million in revenue this year. Well, it takes a lot of people for that to happen. And there is no one person in this dealership that can make that happen. But when you break it down to the month, to the department, to the person, to the day, now you can say, Ron, this is what I need you to do every day. And if you do that, you'll be part of how we get to this. Now I've painted a picture that's believable to you. You now understand that you can do that element for yourself, which allows you to fulfill your obligations, create a lifestyle for yourself, and it's working towards the desired result. And so we all talk this big picture. This is what we're expecting. This is whatever, whether it's a manufacturer, whether it's medical, but there's no one person that can get it there. But when you break it down to the person, to the day, to what their contribution is, it becomes very believable. And when you get everybody believing that they can do it, man, you just create the big old giant wake behind you because you're
Oh
rowing
yeah.
so fast. And that's what makes it fun. And that's what mile one is breaking it down into believable steps. I can do that. I can do that. And the next thing you know, I'm done.
So
Well,
measuring is just being able to break it down to the small, to the everyday, to the mile one, and assigning that to the actual individual, on the team, right? So, and then having them believe that they're part of that bigger vision. So, that's another part of leadership that I feel like aspiring leaders definitely need to hear is, how do you get team members involved in that bigger vision, and then also show them that you care about their own growth. What are some elements of that, Ed, for you?
it's about connecting with them personally. And we all have a reason why we do things. And my biggest purpose in life is family. It's my daughter, it's Natasha, it's our girls. That's my purpose in life. So it doesn't matter how successful I am at work. If it doesn't allow me to have the life to dance with the purpose that I want to dance with, then it's not relevant to me. And connecting with our people and learning what their purpose is, and then allowing or building that role around them for that to enhance what they want to do in life, it gives them even more purpose to accomplish the desired results, so they can chase even harder of what their purpose is in life. And it's just like you mentioned it a minute ago without even knowing. I may come join you for that marathon because you hadn't done one yet. Well, you know what that does? That motivates me to work harder so that I can hang with you, because you're a little faster per mile than I am.
It's
So
okay.
that's what it's
You
all
know why?
about.
Because we'll both still finish.
Exactly,
Bingo.
exactly, and it'll be both of our personal best.
Exactly.
Yes.
I love
So
that.
it's about learning their purpose, and that takes connections, and it takes intentionality, and intentionality is what it's all about, and being intentional with everything you do, as long as it's for the right reasons. And when you do that, it comes together, and it's impactful to everyone around you, and they want to be on that same ride with you.
Yeah. And, I'm going to toot your horn a little bit here, Ed, but in the book, you mentioned about Alan Mulally, and hopefully I'm saying his name correctly. Um,
Well,
Mulally. So he was the president of Boeing. Is that accurate?
so he was the CEO of the commercial division,
Of commercial.
not the CEO of the whole Boeing, but the CEO of the commercial division of Boeing, and then became the CEO of Ford Motor Company in 2006 through
Right.
2014.
So Alan, kind of validated the fact that Mile One, he endorsed the book, as a leadership book. Is that part of what has now led to you being able to coach Ford dealers across the U.S. with Mile One in mind? Was it that relationship that sparked that?
It's an element of, for sure, and things compound over time. So it's different things creates the foundation to move to something else, and so that was certainly an element of. But Alan Mulally was one of the greatest leaders in our time, no matter the industry. Thankfully, he just happened to cross paths with the same industry that I have spent most of my career in, and unknowingly has been a mentor of mine. And that's what we talked about earlier: is you don't necessarily know who you're mentor of.
Mm-hmm.
And when I wrote when I was writing Mal One, and I reached out to him, and I thought, "There's no way this guy's going to reach back out to me." And then the conversations that we had, and then he being open to being an early reader, and those connections there, and this just the feedback that I got was so much validation. He had gave me validation in how he led Ford Motor Company, and the things that he did at Boeing after 9/11. But then having those conversations, we've all ran into people where you just click,
Right.
and that's what it was right from the beginning with Alan. It was we was speaking the same language. We just clicked. It was fun, and we banter back and forth now, and we have fun with each other. But yeah, it's those are the cool elements of. I could have sat back and said, that guy doesn't have time for me. But what I said was, he hasn't told me that he doesn't have time for me yet. So
Let him
until he
tell.
does, it's fair game.
Yeah. So, and I bring him up, Ed, because again, it's a example to the audience of persevering and going after something that you believe in, and then just something that I want to make note of you that you said with I think I know that you realize it, but maybe not in the moment, is that you earlier told me about an author. Like, I didn't think I'd ever be an author, and then because you continue to pursue that, and then you eventually did. I mean, think about how that had the impact on the relationship that you created with Alan and how you reached out to him in your letter, right? It's such I want you to take credit for that because it's such a huge thing. And I think the audience can really learn that, like, if you want something, just go for it until somebody tells you no. And if they tell you no, it might not be the right person telling you no. Go find somebody who might be like, you know what, that's a great idea. Yes. Because we're all driven by different things. And then on the leadership side of it, he really validated, it sounds like, that the biggest lesson for leaders is the ability to navigate and manage change in a positive way. So, going to go coach, dealerships across the United States and Ford stores specifically, is that the biggest takeaway that you want them to get from when you go and actually do coaching with these dealerships?
That's the single biggest thing that we talk about is change. And we're all uncomfortable with change to a certain point. And because, man, what if it doesn't work? What if it is? Because we fear failure.
Right.
Well, ultimately, that has held our industry back, and it's held others back, but it's held our industry back for decades. And I tell people all the time that the automotive industry is 30 years behind. And we happen to be here, we're about 20 years behind. So that puts us about 10 years ahead of the competition. And yes, we're highly respected. We're this, we're that, but what that tells me is we're 20 years behind. We're still behind. So it's making those changes. And think about that for a minute. You think, well, no, we're not 30 years, but we still look for a fax machine. We still have
Right.
copiers everywhere. We're paper everything. We don't digitize anything. We don't have true click to buys. We have bait clicks to where it drives you here, so I get your information, so I get you down here. What we should be doing is when someone submits a lead on a vehicle and saying, Ron, do you still live on Garrison Drive? You're 18 minutes from me. I haven't looked at this vehicle yet, but in order for us to have it in stock, I know it's a good vehicle. Why don't I grab the keys? I'll drive it out to you. We'll look at it together in your driveway. What do you think about that? That's meeting customers on their terms, And that's what the world does today. That's what Amazon does. That's what all the DoorDash,
DoorDash.
all those
Yeah.
elements. Yeah, that's what they meet our customers on their terms. Carvana, Vroom, and we still try to do everything in the world to get them to come darken our doors. And they've told us in every way possible they don't want to. And we're still hanging on to it because that's the way we've always done it. Nothing can happen until I get them here.
Do you think that that's one of the bigger lessons also for the audience, in for themselves, like change management? How does an individual handle that change management, Ed? Because at the same time, it's like before you can expect other people to change, we have to make the changes internally to ourselves, right?
Exactly. Goes back to the mindset element. You have to believe it. You have to
Hmm.
believe that there's a better way, whether it's a vision. And so mindset, everybody has control of the vision element of how can it be different? Maybe we don't all have. Not all of us can look out and say, okay, there is a better way and this is the way it is and let's go do it. That
Right.
doesn't happen. But there's resources for us to have that. But once you find that there is another way to do it, you have to have the mindset that you have to shift your mindset to, okay, we can get there. We can find a better way to do it and we can go do it this way or that way. And as you believe it, it builds that confidence that we talked about earlier. And then you can deliver it to the team with that level of confidence. But if you're unsure about it and you tell them, let's go try this, let's dip our toe in it, then you're asking for failure. And I tell people all the time, there is no plan B. You create a plan and you chase it. If you have to make modifications to that plan, you make modifications to that plan. But what you're telling your mind when you create plan B is, I have a backup plan. If that doesn't work, we'll cancel that and we'll go down this direction. Well, you've just told your mind that plan A is not going to work and there's another way if you need to.
Hmm.
So get rid of plan B, focus on plan A, make the changes that you need to make as you run into opportunities, obstacles that's disguised as opportunities.
Hmm.
Make those changes and push through it. But if you stick your toe in it, people ask, why do you run so many mobile trucks? I don't want customers to come to my dealer. Hopefully, at some point, I'm running 500 trucks out there. Right now, we're up in the 40s now. And but if I stuck my toe in it and said, I'm going to have mobile service and have a vehicle, well, at the rate of the number of repair orders that we serve, we wouldn't touch hardly any of our customers.
Hmm.
So you have to jump in. So get out of the mindset, I'm gonna try this and see if it works. Throw try out the window.
I like that, especially on the personal front, Ed, because it's the old story about burn the boats, and I don't know the conquistador that went to the Caribbean islands what his name was exactly, but for everybody out there, like it's old school. Conquistador goes out to the islands to go conquer an island, and he goes out with his crew. He gets to the island, and all the indigenous people are there, and they know that they're going to have a battle, and a lot of the people started to wanted to retreat. And what the leader did was he went and burned the boats, and he said, "We have no choice but to stay here and win." So like
Okay.
even in your own life, stick in it and win. So if you make a decision towards something like Ed is saying, stick to it and see it through. Even if you fail and you get to the end and there's failure, there's not failure, there's a lesson there to be learned to take with you moving forward. So, Ed, I just want to thank you so much for being gracious with your time today and being here on Great American Underdog. As we close out, I do have a question. What would be the number one challenge or question you'd encourage the listeners to ask themselves who are currently writing their own underdog story and feel maybe that the obstacles or challenges around them are insurmountable? What would you tell them to maybe talk to themselves about in order to overcome them?
You said it a moment ago. We're all going to run into obstacles, and those obstacles are not barriers, they're lessons. And as long as we learn from the things that we're living in, and different ones of the audience has been through a divorce, and different ones have not, but they've been through breakups and whatever. And in those moments, you feel like the world's coming to an end. But then you learn from it and you move forward. And that's what it's all about. Those obstacles right now are truly, truly, truly lessons. Don't let them win. Push through. What Ron didn't tell you is they were significantly outnumbered when they got to the island.
That's right.
And plan B was to retreat, got rid of plan B, and they conquered the island. Our obstacles are just opportunities to learn. And as long as we take it as a life lesson to learn, we will get better, we'll overcome those obstacles, and will make us a better person in the end.
I love it. Ed, thank you so much. For the audience out there, where can they find you and your book if they want to get in touch or purchase your book? What's the best way?
I I am on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. All my personal contacts there, so they can get whatever. The book is on Amazon. It's also on Audible and all the Audible type settings. So it's easy to find. But stay tuned. We'll revise that one here in the coming months and have another one to follow.
Well, I'm looking forward to it myself. Big fan of yours always. And the people listening to this, stay tuned because there's definitely a lot more to come from Ed Roberts. In my opinion, he's just getting started. So, once again, thank you, Ed. This has been another incredible episode of Great American Underdog, the podcast for stories of strength and success from real life underdogs. Thank you again for listening. We're out of here. Bye.
Thanks, Ron.